Today I want to go over a couple things here concerning your dry blasting cabinet, specifically about your dust collection. And you should be running a dust collector. I hope you are, because, well, for various reasons, of course. One is you don't want to destroy your lungs, and second of all, if you're not doing that, you can't see what you're doing inside the cabinet. So you should be running some sort of dust collection. And it doesn't have to be expensive and overly complex. So I'm just going to go over a few things here that I've learned in a few years I've been messing with this stuff. The one thing you see here now in the frame, that's this part here, that is something I came up with several years ago, and it's the first stage in dust collection, at least in my case. A lot of times in the cabinet you'll just see a hole in the side of the cabinet, and you know, with a port you can attach a hose. In this case, what I did was, I still run a hose on the outside, of course, but I think this is 1.5 inch drain pipe, and I'm running it down, you see here, to 3-inch drain pipe. Now the reason for that is, instead of just running a straight pipe in here, what happens if you have an open port and you're running a dust collector, as soon as the dust gets in the air and it gets pulled through this port, and you lose a lot of your abrasive that way. So what I did was, as a first step to conserving my abrasive, is I added this bell on the end, and what that does is slow down the airflow, because it's going quite quickly through an 1.5 inch pipe and even through a 2-inch hose. So faster air carries more abrasive. It suspends it more easily. Like in a windstorm or a tornado, it picks up dirt and suspends it. It's kind of the same concept. Faster air suspends more particles. So you want to slow the air down so you can let your abrasive drop out. And that's what this does. It's a larger diameter, so it can carry the same volume of air as this piece here, but it can do it at a much slower speed. Okay, so that's the first step that I did. And the second step here, and I'll close the lid here in a second, you can see up here I have a Cyclone attached, and here is the bottom cap I have on it, but I'm going to show you what I did here. This is the Cyclone, and this hose is coming from that bell-shaped exhaust port I just showed you, and then the air comes in here. If you're not familiar with Cyclones, Cyclone, what it does is it uses airspeed to cause a circular motion in here, and that what happens is the particulates start spinning, and due to centrifugal force they get cast out onto the sides of the Cyclone, slide down into the collection hopper. It's a very simple concept, and these things are, believe it or not, are well, if they're designed properly and you have the right airstream, over 90% efficient. So these are very good at collecting particles without having to use an air filter. This goes to my dust collector. This is a 2-inch outlet, and Cyclones can be used a couple different ways. You can go from the fan blower and blow it into here, or you can go from the suction side, and then it sucks the air in. Either way they work just about the same. Now, it's not typical to see a Cyclone mounted directly to the top of a sandblaster. I built a Cyclone. Don't look at the welds here. It was kind of difficult to weld this thin material. But I built a Cyclone a few years ago and mounted it to the top of a 5-gallon bucket. And I mounted the base to a piece of plywood with a seal on it, so air couldn't get in the bucket whenever I turned on the dust collector. But it worked extremely well. I could collect my abrasive, throw it back into the sandblaster, and reuse it once, and then after that it was no good because it was too fine and too compact and it wouldn't flow properly. But it was really good to conserve abrasive. What I decided to do, because I was tired of taking a 5-gallon bucket full of abrasive, because it weighed about 40 pounds or so, and then dumping it back into my blasting cabinet, what I decided to do is just mount this to the top of the cabinet itself. So what happens now that I don't have a 5-gallon bucket, the abrasive just collects in this hopper, and periodically I have to, well, you saw that rubber stop in there. I have to take off that rubber stop and drain this hopper here to introduce that used abrasive back into the system. And as it gets finer and finer, it eventually gets drawn out into the dust collector itself. Now, you don't need an expensive dust collector. You can actually use this with a like a 5 horsepower shop vac. It works just fine. And you can get very fine filters for your shop vacs too, but the problem that I was having is those filters clog up very quickly. Like within 10 minutes of blasting, they were clogged up to the point where I couldn't see. So that is why I built this Cyclone, and that dramatically reduced the amount of times I had to clean my filter. I reduced it to about once every operating hour. Now that I have the dust collector, I don't really even have to mess with that. But that is something, if you're running a shop vac, you can do that. Now you might say, well, why don't I just take the filter off the shop vac and just blow the dust out into the air? You can do that, but the problem is though, is you'll destroy the bearings in the shop vac within probably about 2 months, maybe a month. I've done that and I've burned up about 3 or 4 shop vacs, so it's just doesn't work. Anyway, I wanted to tell you about this, and I realize probably some people don't have the facilities to roll steel. I don't have a slip roll here either. I actually bent this in segments on a piece of box tubing. I did this by hand, formed everything by hand, made the cone, and then welded it. But this is thin material. I think it's like 60 thousandths or 16th of an inch, something like that. And I formed this area here too. But if you don't want to go through all that, there is a product out there called Dust Deputy, and you can get them online. They're a little bit pricey. They were like 50 or 60 bucks, but it's a plastic cyclone you can attach to a bucket that will collect particles, you know, just as well as this one, I'm assuming, because it's, you know, it was designed to be marketable. But when you get it, you can also adapt it to go to the top of your cabinet like this one, and that's what I would do. So that will save you from having to build this one. Now I want to show you how well this works here. This isn't a live demonstration of me sandblasting apart and showing it sucking up dirt, because you really can't see anything. But what I'm going to show you is I've been running this Cyclone now for, according to the timer, 45 minutes. I've been blasting parts. Now I'm going to show you the amount of dust that this thing collected. So I'm going to remove that cap inside now, that black cap. That's just a test plug for plumbing. Take that off. See a little bit of stuff coming out. Now all you have to do, because sometimes it won't come out, you just have to tap that Cyclone. So you can hear the change of sound whenever that thing was getting empty, and that's pretty much all there is to it. And once it's empty, of course, that's just a regular test plug for plumbing. And that pipe that I have on the bottom of Cyclone, that's a piece of 2-inch exhaust pipe, you know, automotive stuff for building tailpipes and whatever. And that's all you have to do. And what that plug does is, you can't, like the bottom of the Cyclone, you can't just leave that open, because what happens is, instead of the airflow coming through the inlet port, it'll come through the inlet port plus the bottom, and it'll just suck everything into the dust collector, and then you'll lose all your abrasive. Okay, so that's pretty much what I wanted to show you today. Just a couple real simple modifications you can do to your sandblaster to keep, you know, to conserve your abrasive, because the stuff isn't cheap. Especially silicon carbide is really expensive, and so is aluminum oxide. I use crushed glass here. It's by far my favorite abrasive, but even so, you know, people don't give it away. Another thing I should mention too while we're at it, I could cover it today, is my viewing glass here. I do so much blasting that I have to change this quite often. So I was running a 1/4 inch viewing glass, and I'd have to replace that every, I don't know, about every month maybe, as it got frosted on the side, because I'm left-handed. It always gets frosted on the right side. So what I do now, instead of getting 1/4 inch glass, is I get 1/8 inch glass, and then I layer it up into a 1/4 inch. And then as the first layer gets clouded up, I take that out, and then I put the top one on the bottom, and then put a new piece of glass on top. So I have about 2 hours on this glass right now, and as you can see, it's in really good shape. No problem. I stick my LEDs back on with some duct tape, and that gives me a very effective lighting arrangement. Okay guys, I hope that helps you out in your sandblasting setup. I've worked on different sandblasters in shops, and you can't hardly ever see inside those things. Even the factory setups, the dust collection setups are very poor, and they do not remove abrasive properly, and they're always dark inside, and the glass is always clouded, and that plastic film that they use does not work because it's static. Electricity attracts all the dirt to it. So this is the most efficient thing I've come up with so far, and it makes my life so much easier when you're doing real fine restoration work on old parts. You just need to have them done properly, and this makes your job a lot easier. Okay guys, I'll be seeing you next video.